I want to make one prediction. I'm not calling around. I predict that when I meet Joe Frazier, this will be like a good amateur fighting a real professional. This will be like a kid out of the Olympics meeting the fastest heavyweight champion that ever lived. This will be no contest. This fight will be much easier. He will be easier to hit. He will not be as much trouble or as awkward as Oscar Bonavino. Joe Frazier, this will go down. I predict that the fans will be angry. They'll be mad at the critics. They'll be mad at the experts for misleading them so much.
Let's say 20 years ago, you know what I mean? This is the day, man. You understand?
I just want
You're not fighting Quarry. You're not fighting Oscar Bonavena. You're not fighting Sonny Liston. You fighting Joe Frazier.
Everybody knows that's not the point.
That's the point.
Joe, what's your prediction?
My predict the fight wouldn't go the distance.
Oh, it won't
I'll
go the
stop
distance.
it.
Stop me. You.
How soon? What round?
Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali were two very different men, both in the way that they fought and in the way that they lived. But these two champions would come to define each other's place in history, each man bringing out the best in the other inside the ring and the worst outside of it. They would face off for the first time in 1971 in what came to be known as the Fight of the Century. When the match was first scheduled, both men's unorthodox techniques made it anyone's guess what would happen in the ring. Ali used complex footwork to circle his opponents from the outside, catching them with whipping jabs before dashing in to throw lightning-fast combinations. In contrast, Frazier would drive directly at his opponents. Rather than use traditional footwork to cut off the ring, Frazier would just charge straight in, counting on his crossguard and phenomenal head movement to keep him safe. Both Frazier and Ali had some of the best defense of all time, but once again, were polar opposites in the way they went about it. Frazier used his erratic head movement to make his opponents miss, ducking in under their punches to catch them with his powerful gazelle hook. In contrast, Ali would lean far back, making his opponents chase him and overreach so that he could land a perfectly placed counterpunch. Frazier took his power from the ground, exploding off of his deep crouch. Ali got his power from his opponents, tricking them into stepping into his punches for him. Both men were similar in that they wore their opponents down over time. Frazier with constant wrestling and body shots, and Ali with lightning-fast jabs that cut and swelled his opponent's eyes and took the air out of their lungs. But this match was more than just a clash of styles. Several elements combined to make this fight transcend boxing in the eyes of the public. Ali had recently come off of a 3-year suspension, having lost his license for refusing to be drafted into the Vietnam War, a war he did not agree with. As a result, Ali had been stripped of his title. But after 3 years of trying, he'd regained his boxing license, and the world witnessed the rare occurrence of two undefeated heavyweight champions, both with legitimate claims to the title, squaring off in the ring. At the time of the fight, Ali was waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on his case, and he knew that at any moment he could lose his appeal and spend 5 years in prison. Frazier was one of the few boxers who refused to call Ali by his chosen name, and had been among the first to condemn Ali's decision not to be drafted into the war. As a result, Ali was relentless in his attacks on Frazier, framing himself as a proud fighter against oppression, and framing Frazier, in most ways unfairly, as the antithesis of everything he stood for. When Frazier and Ali stepped into the ring, to many they were not mere men, but champions of their causes, ready to perform trial by combat for their respective sides. Feeling betrayed and cast as the villain, Frazier came to deeply hate Muhammad Ali. In his locker room before the fight, Frazier prayed and asked God to help him kill Ali, as he was not a righteous man. The time came, and the men stepped into the ring. To give a small idea of the epic proportions this fight had grown to, Archie Moore was to announce the fight. Frank Sinatra, unable to get tickets, had agreed to take pictures for the newspapers. In Ireland, the mass riots that had crippled the nation came to a halt, as the men cleared the streets so as not to miss this fight. And in the ring, the two fighters squared off, Ali yelling threats, Frazier staring back with fire in his eyes, before finally uttering, "I'm gonna kill you." The bell rang. Ali had promised this would be an easy fight, no competition. And in the first 3 rounds, Ali seemed to deliver on his promise. His plan for the fight was not to dance, but to keep Frazier in the center of the ring and punish him with grounded, hard punches. When Frazier got close enough to land, Ali would move laterally, or tie Frazier up and turn him, regaining the center of the ring. For this plan to work, Ali needed to be able to consistently catch Frazier, a man with one of the best defenses in the history of the heavyweight division. But astonishingly, it seemed he could. Ali was the first opponent that Frazier had faced with the talent to read his erratic rhythm, the reflexes to spot small openings, and the speed to take advantage of them. During each round, the two men fought with their words as well as their fists, hurling insults at each other between exchanges. While the crowd roared every time Frazier landed with his left, they were few and far between, and Frazier had not done any real damage to the ex-champ as he walked back to his corner at the end of the third. But Frazier had been establishing and improving certain techniques over the last 3 rounds that should have greatly concerned Ali. First, Frazier had been sneaking in tight, hard shots to the body each time Ali tied him up. Frazier was no stranger to grappling, and had learned through years of trial and error that it was often best to go with the movements of the opponent. And so, rather than struggle against a bigger man like a novice, Frazier would pull his arm back when Ali tried to stifle his blows, throwing around his guard. He would also catch Ali just as he tried to disengage, taking advantage of the small, brief openings provided. The punches were few and far between, but it was a start. And although Ali had done the impossible and gotten inside Frazier's rhythm, Frazier had been learning Ali's timing as well, and mapping out the holes in his defense. While Frazier had a hard time countering Ali's right, he had found that he could weave outside Ali's lead hook to connect with near impunity. The position and angle of this punch is something far more likely to be thrown by a crafty southpaw, and it repeatedly caught Ali by surprise. This had awarded Frazier the ability to drive Ali to the ropes, although he hadn't, as of yet, done any meaningful damage. Frazier had built the foundations for these techniques in the first 3 rounds, and now, heading into the 4th, they were about to pay dividends. Round 4 began. At first, Ali continued to punish Frazier as he chased Ali in circles around the ring. But then, deep into the round, Frazier landed the first of his hooks to truly shake Ali. Driven back to the ropes, Ali tried to clinch, but Frazier broke through, targeting Ali's body and smashing tight, hard shots into his ribs and hips. Ali came back, landing hard, but then he took another tremendous hook as the round came to an end. Frazier had now established his lead hook, proving to Ali that this would be no easy fight. Round 5 would bring out the best in both fighters. Ali came out circling, with Frazier deftly evading his punches and pressing forward. Ali caught Frazier with a hard right, whipping his head back. This punch would have put many of Ali's former competitors to sleep, much as any one of the terrifying hooks Frazier landed on Ali would have put his opponents to sleep. Frazier kept coming, but Ali had stopped throwing the wide hook that had kept getting him into trouble, and had started to effectively forearm block and deflect Frazier's best weapon. When Ali landed another solid 1-2, Frazier had had enough. Frazier lowered his hands and taunted Ali, daring him to hit him. Ali would later describe this round in depth. "My jabs bounced off his head, but he keeps coming. Why is he so confident? I can feel it. So confident that near the end of the 5th he drops both hands, jeers at me, dares me. I take the dare." Frazier taunted and laughed at Ali as he missed, just as Ali had done to so many great boxers in the past. But Frazier was not the only one with nerves of steel. Ali kept throwing until he found his target. He landed a barrage of sharp rights to Frazier's temple, but Frazier didn't seem to care. By the end of the round, Ali had gained a newfound respect for Joe Frazier. Round 5 had been dramatic, but fairly even. Round 6 would not be. Ali had confidently predicted that Frazier would fall in the 6th, but this was one of the few predictions in Ali's career that he would get entirely wrong. Frazier was well aware of Ali's prediction, and so, true to his nickname, Frazier came out smoking. He pinned Ali against the ropes, stabbing a hard shot into Ali's side to get him to lower his guard, before slamming a powerful lead hook into his chin. Ali would later say that he felt paralyzed after that punch. As the crowd cheered Frazier on, Ali was not trying to land a knockout. He was trying to survive. But he knew if he could just hold on a little longer, make it through the round, he could recover and get his second wind. Ali managed a few solid combinations, but spent most of the round against the ropes trying to regain his energy, Frazier destroying his ribs and hips. Targeting the hips was a common tactic of Joe Frazier, who realized at some point in his career that damaging an opponent's hips greatly diminishes their movement, in the same way targeting an opponent's legs does in MMA. In fact, many of Frazier's former rivals were reminded of him each time they took a step, for days after the fight. And Ali would later say that his hips felt like they'd been beaten with a baseball bat. Mercifully, the bell finally rang. Back in his corner, it was Frazier's turn to be impressed, asking his trainer, "What's holding this guy up?" Ali regained his senses in the 7th, again managing to catch Frazier as he came in. Frazier took 3 or 4 shots for everyone he landed, but Ali was still exhausted, and by the end of the round, he had walked himself to the corner, fighting in something close to a Philly shell. In his corner, Ali had a terrifying thought. What if all of his detractors were right? What if 3 years out of the ring had taken his stamina, and there was no second win coming? In the 8th, the last of Ali's energy finally seemed to have left him. He lay against the ropes, trying to clown to buy time, hoping that maybe Frazier would get angry and make a mistake. But he didn't. Frazier smelled blood, and midway through the round, he tore Ali off the ropes, just to chase him back and unleash his anger on him again. Frazier had told Ali during their meeting years earlier, "You ain't never had to dig before. Every time you breathe, you be breathing right down on my head." There's another reason Ali was so tired, beyond the incredible blows that he had taken, and beyond his 3 years of inactivity. This was what Joe Frazier's style was designed to do. Rather than try to regain his posture when Ali leaned on him, tiring himself needlessly, Frazier would use his lower center of gravity to drive Ali to the ropes. Frazier had crowded Ali every second of the fight, never giving him a second to breathe, punching relentlessly, feinting and milling, keeping him worried, tiring his body and his mind. Ali made it through, and as he walked back to his corner, he knew if he wanted to win this fight, he would have to dig. In the 9th round, Ali came out determined to turn the fight around. He began to find his footing. As Frazier charged in, Ali's strength returned to him. His vision focused, and he began to connect again. Leading with his right, he landed cross after cross. For the first time in the fight, Frazier backed up. And for the first time since his 3-year exile from the ring, Ali looked for a moment like the Ali of old. At the end of the round, Frazier was bleeding from the mouth, nose, and a cut above his eye. But just like Ali, there was no quit in Joe Frazier. The 10th round was when Frazier told the press he would take Ali out of the fight for good. Frazier, determined to turn his prediction into reality, threw everything he had at Ali. But unlike the 6th, Ali was ready, and both men gave as good as they got. Ali caught Frazier as he came in, but Frazier caught Ali every time he crowded him on the ropes. This had now become an established pattern in the fight, with Ali landing several shots as Frazier backed him up, and Frazier landing a few hard shots as Ali tried to reposition himself back to the center of the ring. If this pattern continued, Ali could win by taking the remaining rounds on points. Frazier knew he needed to do something soon, and in the 11th, he got his chance. Ali had always counted on his reflexes. His distance and timing were so great that he could make an opponent miss by less than an inch, and then lead him right into return fire. But Ali's opponents had never leaped into their punches, and Frazier was able to travel enough distance to surpass the remarkable range of motion Ali had in his upper body. Ali had boasted that he had the answer to Joe's hook, that he would simply lean back and move. Frazier had shot back, "But I go to the body first. I get the head another time." His words turned out to be prophetic. Frazier caught Ali with what he would later describe as the hardest punch he'd ever taken in his life. Ali fell, and the ref ruled it a slip. While his true Ali did slip, it's unlikely he would have if he had not been first wobbled by Joe Frazier's punch. Ali shook his head and walked right up to Frazier, but he was shaken, and his reflexes were dulled. Ali couldn't seem to find the time to recover, and as the round went on, he was getting destroyed. Frazier was doing his best to keep Ali in the corner, but for Ali's part, he had to stay on the ropes anyways. They were the only thing keeping him up. So Ali tried to fight from the corner, popping out of his guard to insult Frazier before covering up again. He would steady himself, land flurries where he could, and then hold on again. But then, just as it seemed he may have recovered, Frazier caught Ali with a devastating blow to the jaw, followed by a deep, shearing shot across the stomach that bent him over, and then one more tight hook to the head that buckled his knees. Now, Frazier thought, now I have him. But Ali tied up Frazier, leaned on him, circled away. Fighting entirely on instinct, Ali flicked out 2 light jabs, moved with another hook, tried to tie up Frazier again. Frazier landed through Ali's guard, and Ali made a funny face at him. In probably the most Muhammad Ali moment of the fight, Ali clowned his rival during the biggest fight in the history of the world, as he was seconds away from getting knocked out. And then, Ali kept fighting, looking like he was moving through quicksand, taking another thunderous hook to the jaw that whipped his head around. But still, he was on his feet. Still, he was fighting. Frazier threw himself across the ring, missing Ali by an inch, crashing into him so hard that he spun him around. Ali staggered back dramatically, and Frazier hesitated. It seemed there was a method to Ali's madness. Ali had clowned Frazier so much before that Frazier now thought Ali had recovered and was faking being hurt entirely, which was exactly what Ali wanted him to think. If Frazier had taken the opportunity, the fight may well have ended here. But he did hesitate, and Ali clinched, countered, clowned some more, and then the bell rang. As Ali wobbled to his corner, the physician went to make sure he was still okay to fight, and his corner tried every trick in the book to revive him. There were 4 rounds left, more than enough time to finish the job, thought Frazier. Frazier hit Ali with everything he had in the 12th, but Ali was showing the world something that he had never needed to show them before. That Ali didn't just have great defense. He had a great jaw for when that defense failed. After failing to knock out Ali in the 12th, Frazier was absolutely certain that in the next round, finally, Ali would fall. But, to quote Joe Frazier, in the 13th round, the butterfly got his wings back. Ali summoned the last of his reserves, and through the next 2 rounds, he danced around Joe Frazier when he could, and leaned on him to stay on his feet when he couldn't. In the meantime, Frazier was finally showing himself to be human. With his pace slowed and his reflexes dulled, Ali picked at him, connecting almost at will. At the end of the 13th, Ali did something he'd never done before. He leaned in and fought Frazier on the inside, trading him blow for blow. In the 14th, both men scored heavily, with Frazier mostly targeting the body. Defense no longer seemed to be a top priority for either of them. They simply wanted to land, at any cost. By the final round, both men had been beaten badly. Both of Frazier's eyes were closing, and Ali's jaw was visibly swollen. He had pulled off a miracle 15th round knockout in his very last fight, and he knew he had the power to do it again. And Frazier wanted Ali down. As he later explained, "My adrenaline made me feel no pain, I didn't want to beat this guy. I wanted to knock him out. I kept moving forward, letting the punches fly. Hit me, I hit you. I don't give a damn. I come to destroy you, Clay. Midway through the round, Ali saw his opening. He stepped back at an angle and prepared to throw his right hand, hoping to catch Frazier moving into his punch, the same way he had caught Liston years before. But Frazier had seen an opening as well. He had gotten his distance by landing low, and now he loaded all of his power into his legs. At the same time, both men threw. But Frazier's timing was perfect, and he put everything he had into landing this one punch. Leaping off of his feet, Frazier propelled himself across the ring. Ali's punch landed harmlessly off target, and Frazier's landed flush on Ali's jaw. The greatest crashed to the canvas. Frazier had told Ali all those years ago, "They talk about how fast you is moving away, but you're gonna see how fast I am moving in." This one punch had sealed the deal, cementing Frazier's victory, and finally establishing him as the true heavyweight champion of the world. Ali rose to his feet, but the fight was lost. He tried his hardest, but without a knockout, the remainder of the round was nothing more than a formality. Frazier had silenced his critics and gotten the revenge he so desperately craved. After his 3-year journey to regain his license, fight for his cause, and get his title back, Ali had lost everything. This was not the end of Ali and Frazier. The two would meet 2 more times, and their rivalry would not diminish, but grow to epic proportions. But for now, Ali would need to fight his way back to another chance at becoming champion. In his way stood Ken Norton, and Frazier would continue his domination at heavyweight, heading on a collision course with a powerful young boxer by the name of George Foreman. It had been 3 years since the fateful night that Joe Frazier had knocked down Muhammad Ali in the 15th, and everything had changed. The first fight had captured the attention of the entire world, turning both men into cultural icons before the opening bell had ever rung. The fight of the century had lived up to its name, becoming one of the greatest boxing matches of all time and showcasing the best of both men's contrasting styles. Ali's mobile footwork, high-postured pulls and slips, and blazing fast hands, against Frazier's crouching, erratic head movement, and grounded, thudding punches. In the final round, Frazier had leaped across the ring, landing one of the most beautiful punches ever caught on film. The impact sent Ali crashing to the ground, handing him his first loss, and cementing Frazier as the undeniable champion of the world. The aftermath of the fight had impacted both men in very different ways. Frazier had given everything he had against Ali. He exited the ring over 10 pounds lighter than he had entered it. The fight had so drained Frazier that he needed to stay at the hospital for over a month to recover. Since then, he had fought only occasionally, resting well and handpicking his opponents. Ali had not accepted his loss to Frazier. He continued to proclaim himself the greatest and blazed a trail through the heavyweight division, waging war against the toughest competitors, fighting once every couple months. Fight by fight, he regained much of the skill and endurance he had lost over the 3 years he'd been forced into retirement. By the time Ali defeated the great Ken Norton in their action-packed rematch, the world demanded Ali Frazier too. But before Ali could rematch Frazier for the championship, George Foreman had quickly and painfully wrested the belt from Frazier in the second. Frazier was no longer the champion, but the number 2 contender, and to take his belt back, he would have to face the number 1 contender, the man he hated more than anyone else in the world, Muhammad Ali. The two men's intense dislike for each other was showcased on national television a few days before the bout, when a real fight broke out on the set of a talk show. When Frazier made fun of Ali for needing to go to the hospital after the fight, Ali quipped that he'd been there for 10 minutes, and he'd been classy enough not to mention Frazier's month-long recovery. Things escalated quickly. Frazier stood over Ali. Ali's brother walked onto the stage in response. Frazier threatened Ali's brother. Ali stood and tied up Frazier, and Frazier tackled Ali to the ground. Incidences like these are always bad for boxing, but it's important to mention to fully understand each man's state of mind at the time. Frazier walked off the show. Only a few days later, he would have 12 rounds to get his hands on Ali, without anyone trying to stop him. The night finally arrived. Ali and Frazier once again stared each other down as the ref laid out the rules. Ali didn't taunt Frazier this time, but stayed dead quiet. Tonight was all business. This was his last shot, and he would not waste it. The bell rang. Frazier confidently marched out to the center of the ring, bobbing and milling, and Ali danced. Ali had learned during their first encounter that he could not stay put and try to outbox Frazier, at least not without taking tremendous damage. But he couldn't keep Frazier at arm's length forever, so he had devised a new strategy. Ali drew Frazier into chasing him, and then stopped short just as Frazier was about to catch him, fully committed to rushing in. Then Ali planted his feet in a wide, open stance, throwing rapid-fire punches that came from all angles. These punches were fast, sharp, well-grounded, and unpredictable. It was too much heat for Frazier, and he was forced to back away in the opening rounds. As suddenly as Ali had sprung his trap, he would take off, leaving Frazier swinging in air. As always, Frazier continued to march forward, sure that it was only a matter of time before he sent Ali tumbling to the ground. Frazier knew from experience that he could catch Ali the moment he stopped moving, and then pummel Ali's body as he was trapped against the ropes. But there was more to Ali's strategy than met the eye. Ali was employing lateral movement mid-combination, stepping offline in between punches to stay safe and find new angles of attack. The smallest adjustment was all it took to unsettle Frazier, who stayed low, kept his weight forward, and stayed heavy on his lead leg. A slight step inside would have Frazier turning to follow Ali, but Ali was already moving outside to flank him, attacking from the side and exiting before Frazier could get his bearings. At times, Ali would change directions with every single punch. Despite Ali's dominance in these early rounds, Frazier did manage to land a few powerful shots. In the second, he drove his fist into Ali's stomach so hard that Ali cringed, cried out in pain. Frazier also landed one thunderous headshot, connecting with Ali's jaw as he loaded up to throw his right. Ali threw a tight cross without missing a beat, then flurried, ducked under Frazier's counterhook, and drove him back to the center of the ring. Now that Ali had found a way to manage Frazier's relentless pressure, he resumed his classic footwork pattern, circling and jabbing, trying to set up a more powerful punch. Near the end of the round, he found his mark. He skipped inside with a double jab, and then stepped in deep to land a thudding right hand, rocking Frazier, forcing him to retreat. Frazier fought as he moved backwards, nearly landing a whipping hook, but Ali kept pressing. Just as Ali was moving in for the kill, the ref mistakenly thought he heard the bell and separated the two. Ali and Frazier went back to their respective corners. The fight did resume after the ref had realized his error, but by that time, Frazier had fully recovered. Still, it had been 2 dominant rounds for Ali. He walked back to his corner confident that this time, the fight would go just as planned. However, Frazier was a notoriously slow starter who needed time to get his rhythm, and over the next few minutes, he would find his footing. The two rivals stepped into the ring for the third. Ali kept moving, but by now, Frazier was beginning to catch on to his strategy, and he had just the tools to counter it. It all had to do with footwork. Frazier normally stepped back to front, the exact opposite of most boxers. But this fight, he was employing traditional footwork far more often, stepping front to back and lagging his rear foot behind. Although this limited Frazier's ability to load power and quickly spring forward, it also helped him to better angle his steps and cut off the ring. So when Ali squared up and rebounded side to side, Frazier now stepped laterally with Ali to cut off his escape, rather than charge forward. This was easier said than done, but Frazier was able to get Ali up against the ropes enough in the third to deal some serious damage. With Ali more stationary, Frazier could pummel his stomach with hooks and uppercuts, draining his energy and weakening his legs. It was these same body shots that had allowed Frazier to take control of the first fight. If all went to plan, history would repeat itself. And so, by the fourth, the two appeared to be on equal footing. Frazier was cornering Ali, but Ali was picking at Frazier as he came in, slowing his pursuit with whipping jabs and leading him into punches with hook-uppercut combinations. Frazier would duck low to avoid a hook and take an uppercut for his troubles, or rise to avoid an uppercut, right into one of Ali's hooks. Ali's combinations were proving effective, but Frazier's didn't seem to have the same impact as the last fight. Frazier had used low hooks to the body to set up the damaging head hooks he had landed during the fight of the century. This time, Ali was framing against Frazier's shoulder, straightening his arm to leverage guard against any shots to the head. The only problem with Ali's strategy was that it sacrificed his body to save his head. Frazier knew it was just a matter of time until Ali could no longer withstand the pressure. Right on schedule, Ali slowed dramatically in the fifth. Frazier landed 2 powerful headshots near the beginning of the round, and Ali spent a majority of his time absorbing body blows. But despite Frazier's dominance, Ali was weathering the storm. Ali had spent the last few years refining his grappling. During the first match, Frazier had broken through Ali's clinches almost effortlessly, swimming his hands inside and driving his head into Ali's chest to knock him off balance. But Ali now fought to keep his elbows on the inside and turned his body sideways to stay defensive. Frazier could only land a few shots before his attacks were stifled, but they were still shots coming from Joe Frazier. After the bell rang, Joe was restless in his corner. He couldn't wait for the 6th. But Joe had let his loathing for Ali get the best of him, and he became reckless. Overeager, he stayed upright and charged haphazardly at Ali, eating punches and throwing himself into his hooks. Frazier threw his gazelle hooks with such intensity that he turned his back on Ali, putting himself into a terrible position. Ali capitalized on his mistakes to escape corners, infuriating Frazier all the more. Frazier stayed upright and treated defense as an annoying afterthought. For the remainder of the round, Ali did everything he could to exploit Frazier's impatience. He circled, shuffled, darted from side to side. He landed jabs almost at will, then snuck in tight hooks and uppercuts, punishing Frazier for his efforts. And it was clear to everyone who'd taken the 6th. Halfway through the fight, the judges now had Ali slightly ahead. But although he never did receive much credit for it, Frazier was a crafty fighter when he wanted to be, and he proved it in the next round. Frazier was getting outmaneuvered at long range and tied up at close range, but Ali had one glaring vulnerability left. When Ali flurried, he loaded his punches low and flared his gloves to the side. On the one hand, it was incredibly hard for Frazier to read which kind of punch would be coming at him. On the other, Ali was left wide open for one brief moment each time he threw, and Frazier's timing was legendary. In the 7th, Frazier returned to his low, off-rhythm bobs and weaves. He stayed at mid-range to avoid getting clinched, and timed Ali's punches. Ducking under a low hook, Frazier hurled a powerful left at Ali while his rear hand had moved to load up. The blow knocked Ali back against the ropes. He tried to dance away, but he was clearly shaken, and received another sharp hook to the jaw, this time in the middle of throwing a right. Frazier had found his distance. Frazier now cornered Ali and stayed just far enough away to entice him to punch. Now that he was inside Ali's rhythm, Frazier evaded blow after blow, picking his spots to deal out real damage. Mid-round, a slight turn of the head was all that saved Ali from the same punch that had sent him to taste the canvas years before. It was all Ali could do to keep Frazier off of him. When Ali narrowly missed Frazier with a 1-2, Frazier threw down his hands and taunted Ali, saying his punches were weak, daring him to hit harder. Frazier walked back to his corner smiling, and came back out of it swinging. Ali threw a barrage of punches to stave off Frazier's advance, but Frazier attacked with renewed ferocity, hurling insults in between hurling punches. Ali clinched to stay safe, but Frazier had weakened him, and now he could easily break through Ali's holds. But perhaps Frazier had been drained by Ali's punches as well. He was not so quick in this fight to take advantage of close-range openings, opting at times to lean and rest on Ali rather than work. More than once, the referee frustrated Frazier by breaking the fighters apart. By the middle of the round, Frazier was yelling at both Ali and the ref. Mercifully for Ali, the end of the round was approaching. He had performed a bit better later in the round, and tried to leave an impression on the judges by throwing some impactful shots just before the bell. But Ali had become so fixated on Frazier's left, with good reason, that he had forgotten all about his right. Frazier countered Ali's last punch with a terrifying overhand just as the bell rung, knocking him back and forcing him to shell up. Blood would pour from Ali's nose for the remainder of the fight. With the last 2 rounds clearly belonging to Frazier, the match was now dead even, and it was Frazier who had all of the momentum. Ali dragged himself back to his corner. He was witnessing the last 3 years of hard work and sacrifice go to waste, along with any chance to take back the heavyweight championship. Frazier was ecstatic, laughing and dancing, eager for the round to start so he could finish his rival once and for all. Once again, he drove Ali to the ropes and landed the same effective right as he had the last time, pushing into Ali's chest. But this time, Ali pushed back. He shoved Frazier to the center of the ring, planted his feet, and stood his ground. Ali would not run from Frazier any longer. He would box him in the center of the ring. He began by throwing an insane 15-punch combination. As Frazier drove forward, Ali sidestepped back to the center of the ring again and again, constantly moving off angle as he rained down a torrent of punches. By the time Ali stopped throwing, he had changed places with his adversary. Ali seemed to be a completely different fighter from the last few rounds, willing to take risks and challenge Frazier toe-to-toe. When Ali got pushed too close to the ropes, he wrestled Frazier, shoving him back to the center of the ring. There he cut dangerous angles, stepping forward into the path of Frazier's punches to regain lost ground. It wasn't a perfect strategy. Ali was getting caught fighting so aggressively, but he dealt out far more damage than he took. The momentum had shifted once again. The two former champions threw everything they had, Joe swinging powerful looping shots, and Ali countering with whipping tight punches before stepping offline. Near the end of the round, the crowd roared and cheered, chanting out Ali's name and infuriating Frazier. Lost in the fight, the two exchanged after the bell. The 10th continued the insane action that had been prevalent in the 9th. Ali and Dundee had decided that the fight would need to be won or lost in the center of the ring, betting that Ali could outbox Frazier. This had been their plan the first fight, and Ali had fallen short. But now, after 3 hard years of trial by fire, they believed Ali had the skills necessary to go toe-to-toe with Joe Frazier. This strategy suited Frazier fine, who was forcing Ali to keep a frenetic pace. Frazier marched forward without missing a beat, and landed a couple hard shots to Ali's head. Worn down, his body bruised and battered, Ali started to fade, slowing and retreating. But from his corner, Dundee shouted, "Don't back up! Beat him!" Ali came back to life, forcing himself to stay in the center and giving ground as slowly as possible. Frazier landed a hard, shearing shot across Ali's stomach near the end of the round, forcing him against the ropes. But still, Ali never stopped punching. Determined to finish each round strong, Ali returned to the center of the ring and threw a flurry. But he missed each of the 6 punches he threw, and Joe's counter whipped his head around just as the bell announced the conclusion to the 10th. Going into the 11th, the fight was still neck and neck. Frazier decided that the only sure way to win against Ali was to knock him off of his feet. He again fought ferociously, recklessly, staying upright and shrugging off multiple punches. Frazier almost abandoned defense entirely. Although he landed some powerful shots, Ali was hitting Frazier's head like a speed bag, battering him with every punch in the book, trading 5 lighter punches for just 1 of Frazier's power blows. Frazier went back to his corner without much to show for the last 3 minutes, and only 1 round left to win the fight. It was now clear that Ali was well ahead. If Frazier was going to win, he needed to take it out of the judge's hands. And so, the round opened with a furious exchange. It seemed to take the last of Ali's energy. Ali moved slower and slower, and mid-round, Frazier caught him on the jaw and sunk 2 of the hardest punches of the night into his stomach. The ref separated the two, and Ali called Frazier back, preferring to lean against the ropes. Ali had tried this the last fight in order to hide how badly he'd been hurt. And just as last time, His plan backfired on him. Frazier charged in, clipping Ali's jaw and spearing his ribs. But Angelo Dundee screamed at Ali one last time, "Get out of there!" Ali didn't need to be told twice. With 1 minute left in the fight, Ali summoned his reserves and danced like he had when he was young. Frazier ate shot after shot without hesitation. He needed a miracle knockout, and he only had 1 minute left to do it. But Ali danced away, and the clock ticked down. 50 seconds. Jabbing, shuffling, turning out of corners, floating like a butterfly, and stinging like a bee. 30 seconds, still Frazier came, faster than ever, never once slowing his pursuit. 20 seconds. Frazier was eating punches, but he didn't seem to care. 10 seconds. Joe jumped in one last time, but Ali tied him up. Exhausted, Ali could dance no more and hung on for dear life the last few seconds of the fight. Frazier raised his arms in victory, but he must have known the inevitable conclusion. The announcer took the mic and declared Muhammad Ali the winner by unanimous decision. Ali had avenged his one loss and taken another huge step towards regaining his lost championship title. Frazier had taken his second loss, this time against the man he hated more than anyone else in the world. Just as Ali refuted the judge's decision the first time, Frazier now refused to consider himself beaten. He admonished Ali's use of clinching to slow down the action and demanded a rematch with a referee who allowed him time to work inside. We can be thankful that he did. The next time Ali and Frazier met in the ring, the fight would not go the distance, finally settling the most dramatic rivalry in sports history. But for now, Ali would go on to face George Foreman, the man who had floored both Frazier and Norton in under 2 rounds. Almost no one gave Ali a chance. Muhammad Ali had done the impossible, recapturing the heavyweight title from George Foreman. But he was not satisfied. There was one man who'd given him too much trouble, one man who could be pointed to as evidence that perhaps Ali was not the greatest of all time. That man was Smokin' Joe Frazier. The two had met twice previously. Their first encounter, the fight of the century, had already become ingrained in American psyche as one of the greatest matches in history. The insane action had been fueled in part by the intense personal dislike the two champions felt for each other. Ali had so enraged Joe that in his locker room before the fight, Frazier had prayed to God to help him kill Ali. When the fight first began, Ali had seemed capable of handling Frazier easily, proving himself the first opponent with the talent to read Frazier's erratic rhythm, the reflexes to spot small openings, and the speed to take advantage of them. But then, Frazier had begun to penetrate Ali's defenses, his erratic bobs and weaves getting past Ali's renowned rapid-fire lead hand. Frazier was soon thumping shots into his rival's body, doubling him over and enticing him to lower his guard. The result was a back-and-forth battle for the ages. But the way Frazier leaped into his lead hook let him rapidly cover an incredible amount of distance, and it was Ali who had tasted the canvas, cementing Frazier's triumph and destroying any and all doubt about who was the real heavyweight champion of the world. The two would meet again only a few years later. Circumstances had changed, and both were now top contenders, fighting for a chance to take their title back from George Foreman. The two men's intense dislike for each other was again showcased on national television a few days before the bout, when a real fight broke out between them on the set of a talk show. For their second fight, Ali had planned numerous ways to negate Frazier's aggressive style. He stopped short to lead him into flurries, kept his elbows in tight when clinching so Frazier could not pummel his hands through, and used Frazier's head movement against him, using one punch to lead Frazier into another. But Frazier began to time and counter Ali's uppercuts, a punch that had been a major boon to him just a few rounds prior. Ali had been forced to push Frazier back and fight him toe-to-toe in the center of the ring, moving towards Frazier's hook to cut angles and stay center. Ali stole the later rounds, turning the fight around and avenging his loss. Leading up to the fight, Ali continued his old shenanigans, holding up a gorilla meant to represent Frazier and proclaiming, "It'll be a killa, a chilla, a thrilla when I get the gorilla in Manilla." As always, Frazier was not amused. To quote the man himself, "I still despised him for trying to misrepresent me to the public, No one gave his heart and soul to the sport as I did. This was a nasty, envious, mean-spirited egomaniac who still couldn't stand the fact that in the biggest fight of his life, I'd put him on his ass. No one could have suspected that this fight would surpass the other two, becoming the only one of their 3 encounters where one fighter did not make it to the final round. The night came, and both men stood squared up in the center of the ring for the 3rd time. Ali yelled threats at his rival, wide-eyed. Joe simply retorted, "I'm gonna kill you, Clay. You're dead." Ali's corner was managed by the legendary coach Angelo Dundee. His opposite for this fight was Eddie Futch, considered by many to be the greatest coach who ever lived. The bell rang. Ali planted himself in the center of the ring, squared up, flat-footed, hands high. True to his word, he let his fists fly early, looking to knock Frazier out in the 1st round. Despite all of his talk, no one had predicted that Ali would actually come out so aggressively. It was like the two had picked up where they'd left off in their first fight, almost as if this were simply the next round. Although Ali was being reckless opening up so quickly against Joe Frazier, there was a method to his madness. Frazier was known to be a bad starter. His style required time to read his opponent's tempo and get into a groove. Only then could he slip and weave his way inside to crowd and counter. Ali looked to take advantage of Frazier before he had time to figure him out, so he set a furious pace and threw his hardest shots from the opening bell. Frazier's plan was to rush Ali and hurry him into making a mistake. He bobbed down low and presented himself as an easy target, looking to draw and counter, his hands fluidly switching from high guard to cross guard. Futch's plan for Frazier was to have him once again counter Ali's unorthodox, open uppercuts. He waded into Ali's punches, crouching low before exploding into his blows. But unfortunately for Frazier, Ali was not throwing uppercuts, a punch known for being the most defensive strike in a boxer's toolkit. Ali was all offense. Eventually, Frazier tempted fate one too many times. It was not an uppercut, but a tight hook that slammed into Frazier as he charged in, stunning him. When Ali saw his unshakable, unstoppable rival wobbled in the 1st round, he went ballistic, unloading everything he had. But Frazier was made of tougher stuff, and got into Ali's rhythm just in time, weaving in between his attacks and pressing forward to put Ali on his back foot. Frazier walked to his corner having lost the 1st round, but with far better chances of winning the fight for having gotten past it. The 2nd quickly arrived. Only a few seconds in, something happened that would drastically change the course of the fight. Ali grabbed the back of Frazier's neck, looking to reserve his energy early so he could later explode into action. But the referee, who had received a talking from Frazier's coach about this exact scenario, pulled Ali's hand away. When Ali tried the tactic again a moment later, the referee once more warned Ali, astonishing him by putting his own hand over Ali's neck to make sure he got the point. Ali was quickly forced to change tactics. He now looked to slow Frazier's pursuit by employing an extended guard. Holding his lead hand in front of Frazier's eyes, Ali tracked his head movement, steering him off course and blocking his vision. If Ali could not smother Frazier's attacks at close range, then it was best to not let him get close at all. Ali, a master boxer, expertly led Frazier into his punches. He used slower, off-rhythm feints to entice Frazier into slipping into vulnerable positions, and then upped the cadence of his next punches to exploit the new opening. But despite that, Frazier only upped the pace. Undeterred, as always, Frazier managed to close the distance. Ali's extended guard left his stomach and ribs wide open, and this was a major vulnerability against Joe Frazier. Unable to clinch when Frazier did get through his defenses, Ali was forced to simply cover up, taking the brunt of Frazier's lethal hooks on his guard, before pushing him back to the center of the ring. The bell sounded the end of the round. Annoyed at Frazier's relentless aggression even after having taken several high-impact blows, Ali yelled, "You dumb chump you," as Frazier walked away. Frazier waved him off dismissively. Ali, still believing an early knockout to be a certainty, blew kisses to the crowd in between rounds. At the start of the 3rd, he made the few punches round began with the same fire and fury as the last had ended. Frazier crowded Ali, weaved under his attacks, and landed a solid shot of his own. But Ali gave it less thought than a mosquito, continuing to throw and ducking underneath Frazier's return fire to escape the ropes. He knocked Frazier off balance as he pivoted away, and then caught him from the side with a sneaky, jarring right. The punch seemed to set the tone of the round, which proved overwhelmingly favorable for Ali. He led with crosses, pounding them into Frazier's skull. He ducked outside of Frazier's hooks, and controlled distance with both hands, using one to lead Frazier's head into the other. But Frazier's coach was not concerned. He figured that Frazier's frenzied pace was rushing Ali, not allowing him time to set himself and get the full weight of his body into his punches. Only time would tell if he were right. Frazier, meanwhile, started to pick away at any opening he could find. He received a warning from the referee on a low blow, but continued to target Ali's hips, destroying his mobility. Frazier had done the same during their first encounter, and Ali had been in pain each time he took a step for a week afterwards. But despite Frazier's best attempts, the fourth had clearly belonged to Ali. The fifth would not be so kind to the champion. Within the first minute of the fifth, it became apparent that cracks had started to appear in Ali's defense. Frazier was becoming better and better at getting around Ali's long lead hand, which he referred to derisively as his feather duster. He discovered he could knock Ali's arm aside and come up underneath, exploiting his exposed ribs. Now he began to dismantle Ali's high guard as well, jabbing high to provoke Ali to raise his hands, and then sinking in a deep shot that tore into his ribs. Inch by inch, Frazier moved in closer with each exchange. As Frazier himself put it, "I began to rev the engine. In taking on Clay, you have to crowd him and accelerate the tempo, not let him work at the pace he wants. Hurry him, and he'll begin to huff and puff." It became a battle of survival. Now that's my kind of fight. Frazier soon had Ali pressed up against the ropes, his arms weary, his legs tired. He no longer had the strength to shell up and hold firm as he had done in the second. He tried to fight from a crossguard. His body turned away, shielding himself from the brunt of Frazier's attacks. The great irony, which Ali probably would not have appreciated at the time, was that years ago the legendary Archie Moore had tried to teach Ali how to use the crossguard, so that he didn't always have to rely on his speed and mobility. But Ali had retorted that he didn't need it, as he planned to retire young. There was no doubt that Frazier had started to smoke. He dodged almost every punch Ali threw, pushed him back into the corner when he tried to escape, and pummeled his hands through to break Ali's guard and set up short, jarring punches. Frazier at last had the chance to follow through on Futch's strategy. He leapt out of his crouch to avoid Ali's uppercut, slamming a tremendous hook into the champion's jaw. All said and done, Ali was trapped against the ropes for nearly 2 minutes. If the fifth could be called challenging for Ali, the sixth was nothing but a complete disaster. Frazier was now timing the tight lead hooks that Ali had used to rock him in the first. A leaping gazelle punch whipped Ali's head back near the start of the round, and another connected not soon after. He chased Ali from corner to corner, short body shots tenderizing his ribs and hips. But while Ali may not have had the best guard, his head movement was still otherworldly. A well-timed turn of his head was often all that saved him from fight-ending punches. Although it was bad, Ali wasn't out of the fight yet. Halfway through the round, he caught Frazier with another tight lead hook that sent his mouthpiece flying across the ring. The announcers mistakenly thought the mouthpiece had been Ali's, and Frazier, all too happy to go along with the story, later bragged about knocking Ali's mouthpiece across the ring in his autobiography. But all said and done, he may as well have. As Ali walked back to his corner, all thoughts of an easy fight and early knockout had vanished from his mind. Now, it was about survival. In the corner, Dundee berated Ali, telling him, "We blew those rounds. You don't rest on the ropes against Joe Frazier." Ali knew he was right. He was in this for the long haul, and if he wanted to win, he needed to even up the rounds. He decided it was time to pay Frazier back. Ali danced and kept dancing, skipping, cross-stepping, and pivoting across the ring, his legendary jab whipping out like a snake. It pestered Frazier, targeting either eye, lashing out from 3 different directions. occasionally accompanied by a sort of rear hand jab as Ali skewed his hips to work different angles. Most importantly, it set up Ali's stronger punches. But Ali could not dance forever. For all the punches Frazier had taken, punches that had knocked out far bigger, stronger men, he was somehow coming faster than ever. Ali was forced to rest on the ropes more and more often the last minute of the round. Unable to clinch, he took a multitude of tremendous blows. As he walked back to the corner, he knew that he did not have enough left to dance the next time the bell called him out to fight. For the last round, Ali had flown across the ring, but now, Frazier had clipped the butterfly's wings. But if Ali could no longer float like a butterfly, he could still sting like a bee. In the 8th, unable to dance, unable to clinch, Ali instead stood his ground and went toe-to-toe with Smokin' Joe Frazier. The result was one of the most brutal rounds in the history of combat sports. Ali landed early and often, barely bothering to set up his shots. This was not intelligent boxing, this was target practice. Frazier was taking 2 or 3 shots to land one big one, a strategy that had served him well before. But these were not the light, stinging shots that Frazier had become accustomed to taking from Ali. Ali set himself low, rounded his center, and loaded his punches with the full force of his body. Becoming frustrated, Frazier threw a tremendous hook, but Ali pulled back, and now Frazier had thrown his body out of position. Ali took full advantage of the situation. But then, midway through the round, it became apparent that Ali had given all he had to give. He had punched himself out, and now his arms were just as tired as his legs. Frazier spent the remainder of the round destroying Ali's body, persuading Ali to lower his guard so he could target his head. At one point, he pounded a thudding shovel hook into Ali's stomach, then knocked his hips back into the ring post, drawing gasps from the crowd. Ali was happy to leave the 8th behind him. It was unclear to many how either man had remained standing. In the corner, Ali's ring doctor was wondering the same thing. Ali thought he was dying, he would later recall. He was at the ends of exhaustion. He was having trouble staying awake between rounds. This time, Ali would not be so quick to recover. He spent the majority of the next 2 rounds in sluggish retreat, most of his punches sailing harmlessly over Frazier's head. Although he landed well occasionally, Ali mostly spent his time dancing from corner to corner before languishing on the ropes, throwing little, clinching when he had the chance, and covering up the best he could. A small respite for Ali was that Frazier had now started to let his emotions get the best of him, and was wasting shots hunting Ali's head while he still had an upright posture. Had Frazier stuck to Futch's plan and battered his arms, the champion may have lost his ability to punch as well as dance. Still, while it could have been worse for Ali, the situation was far from ideal. By the end of the 10th, Frazier had evened up the fight. Ali decided it was time to test his legs. He came out dancing. Frazier quickly caught his prey, driving a hard hook into Ali's chest and shoving him into the ropes. But Ali turned Frazier, and now it was Joe against the ropes. For the first time in the fight, Frazier stopped moving forward. He stood there, bobbing and weaving to stay safe. Frazier broke the stalemate with a leaping left hand, but his pursuit now came in increments. Frazier would later explain, "For me, this night was a tiring one, given how damn hot it was in the arena. 110 degrees, they said. When I'd suck in air, it was like walking into an oven." Frazier swatted a lazy right hand at Ali near the corner, and Ali repaid him with a left hook off a tight cross, jerking Frazier's head around. The punch seemed to finally wake Frazier. Frazier upped the pace, and now it was Ali who dramatically slowed, taking a shearing uppercut as he tried to clinch, and then 3 solid blows to the body just a few seconds later. Ali stayed in the corner for a full minute, Frazier beating on him with either hand, doubling up on hooks to the body and head. It seemed that Ali's rally had been short-lived, the last gasp of a dying man. But according to Ali, his time on the ropes in the 11th was painful, but necessary. He would later explain his behavior in the round. A man who rides a horse and starts off too fast is going to have his horse tired before the race is over. You gotta know when to speed up, when to coast, and when to rest. While Ali was able to pull away from many headshots, he was allowing his body to be used as a punching bag. It was a completely reckless strategy, but it paid off. With under a minute left, Ali, his strength returned, grabbed onto Frazier and pulled him to the center of the ring. Startled, Frazier tried to grab onto the ropes, but the ref helped to rip his hand away. The two men now stood in the center and threw, Ali paying back the beating he'd received on the ropes tenfold. It was now Frazier who ended the round with his back against the ropes. Dundee, watching from the corner, noticed how easy it had been for Ali to move Frazier around. He wondered just how much strength he had left. To make matters worse for Frazier, his eyes were beginning to swell from all the punishment he'd taken throughout the fight. In the 12th, he looked to pay Ali back. Gritting his teeth against 3 hard blows, he managed to press the champion up against the ropes and unload on him almost immediately. But Frazier had finally slowed enough for Ali to get in his rhythm, landing 8 out of 9 blazing fast punches before deflecting Frazier's return fire. Frazier had kept up a breakneck pace for the last 12 rounds. He was like a marathon runner, maintaining a steady pace for miles, but gradually weakening. Ali was more like a sprinter, taking long breaks between activity and then unleashing all the power he had saved up in short, powerful bursts. There were upsides and downsides to both strategies. Ali was under constant pressure and taking consistent punishment. But, unlike Frazier, he was able to store up strength and pick his spots. And so, Frazier had softened enough by the 12th for Ali to push him away, if only momentarily. He only had a moment before Frazier reclosed the distance and filled the gap. But a moment was enough. While Ali's long arms did not allow for much power at close range, his punches still tore into Frazier's face, exacerbating the swelling in his already damaged eyes. Ali danced away near the end of the round, trying to make Frazier believe that he was still fresh. But the truth was, while it was Frazier who had appeared to slow, it was Ali who was beyond exhaustion. In his corner, Frazier informed Futch that his eyes had gotten worse. He had spent the last half of the round fighting in a kind of haze, barely able to make out Ali's punches as they barreled towards his head. Thinking on his feet, Futch came up with a plan. In his own words, "So I told Frazier to stay back about 8 inches, and made him stand up a little straighter." Futch figured that from further back, Frazier would at least have time to see the punches coming. Across the ring, Ali's head drooped forward, the champion now tired in a way he had never experienced before. He felt as though any second, he may vomit or pass out. But Dundee had sensed an opportunity, and screamed at Ali, "Look at him! He ain't got no power left. Go get him." Ali had sensed it too. He dug deep, and came into the 13th, looking for a knockout. The two met in the middle of the ring, Ali pestering his rival's eyes with stinging jabs, and breaking his own rhythm to lead Frazier into hard crosses. Far from helping him, Frazier's new altered posture left him more open. Midway through the round, Ali slammed a thunderous rear hook into Frazier's jaw, once again sending his mouthpiece flying across the ring, this time out into the audience. Sensing the time had finally come, Ali threw everything he had left at Frazier, landing hard right after hard right, giving all he had to put down the man who had once knocked him to the canvas and denied him his victory in the biggest fight of his life. Never had Ali inflicted so much sustained damage to his rival, and Frazier nearly lost his legs from under him more than once. "I fought him best I could," Frazier would later relate. "I could barely see. I was fighting on instinct, bobbing and weaving. Clay was timing me." But Frazier refused to fall. To quote Ali, "For the 3rd time, Joe Frazier surprised me with his stamina, his relentlessness, and the gunpowder in his blows. I opened his lip and closed his eyes, but he still kept coming, forcing me onto the ropes, making me deliver power when I didn't even know if it was still there." Although he had nearly been knocked out twice in the round, Frazier was still able to throw bombs. Somehow still standing, still fighting, Frazier punctuated the round with a thunderous left hook at the bell. In Frazier's corner, Coach Eddie Futch had a difficult decision to make. Frazier could barely see and had taken a dangerous amount of damage. On the other hand, Frazier had still gotten tremendous punches through near the end of the round. Futch, one of the most perceptive coaches in combat sports, suspected that Ali was close to done. More than anything, he knew how much defeating Ali meant to Joe. He decided to give Frazier one last round to to get the job done. In fact, he was right. Ali, already past his known limits in the 13th, was in uncharted territory. Even he did not know how much he had left to give. But in the 14th, he gave it all. The bell called both out to face each other for the last time. The two circled, dead tired, the look of a wounded animal in the eyes of both. 3 fights, 41 rounds, 2 championships, and 5 years had brought them here. They had tested each other in every way possible, only to find that even now, their skill, physicality, and willpower were nearly even. Their bodies failing, their will driving them on, the fight balanced on a razor's edge. But then, just as it seemed as if both men had spent everything they had, somehow, Ali came to life. He threw one last furious assault, throwing punches as if he'd just come out for the first. But Frazier endured, and he was still looking for that one shot. Frazier sunk low and hurled himself forward with the last of his strength. But this time, Ali pulled away. Frazier crashed into him, and now, both of them were far past spent. Frazier walked forward, his legs giving way, hands drooping below his waist. Ali stumbled in between punches, pausing and taking big, gasping breaths before firing off his hardest shots, over and over, a look of complete disbelief on his face. To quote Ali, when someone asked a marathon runner what goes through their mind in the last mile or two, he said that you ask yourself, why am I doing this? You get so tired. It takes so much out of you mentally. It makes you go a little insane. I was thinking that at the end. Why am I doing this? What am I doing in here against this beast of a man? It's so painful. I must be crazy. Frazier marched forward on sheer willpower, taking everything that Ali threw his way. And then, it was over. The round ended, and Smoke and Joe Frazier was still standing. Through all the rounds and all the fights, Ali had never once put him down. Barely able to see, the referee guided Frazier back to his corner. As Ali sat down, he had a terrifying realization. He was not sure how much longer he could go on. Of course, he didn't know about Futch's decision. All he knew was that Frazier had taken him to his absolute limit, to a place that he'd never been before, a place he would later call the closest thing to death. In Frazier's corner, Coach Eddie Futch, who'd been witness to fighters die in the ring before, had seen enough. "I'm going to stop it," Futch told Frazier. "You're taking too much punishment." Joe protested. "No, don't. I want him, boss." Blind, battered, beaten, Frazier was in no condition to fight. "It's all over, son," Futch told him. "No one will ever forget what you did here today." And so the greatest fight in boxing history came to a close. Ali could not believe it. He stood and raised his hands in victory. A moment later, he fell to the floor. To quote the man himself, "I was so relieved, so tired, and in so much pain that my knees buckled, and I stretched right out where I was, right there in the middle of the ring." He had taken 440 hard, solid punches from Joe Frazier. Many throughout the years have romanticized the so-called lost round, wondering what would have happened if Frazier had been allowed to come out for the 15th. But the truth is, both men had already given what they had to give. Both had left a piece of themselves in that ring, and for each, it was a piece that they would never fully get back. Perhaps Ali said it best. "We went to Manilla as champions, Joe and me, and we came back as old men." Thanks for watching. I've left a list of sources used for all 3 fights in the comments below, along with links to my books on footwork and power. For the modern martial artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.